Hello, everyone. We're so happy you're here. I have Jamie here with me from Adobe XD. We're super excited to hold another webinar for everybody. Oh, Katie's here as well. I'm going to add Katie in. But hi, really quickly, I am Emily. I am the Designlab community manager, and I basically help put all this together and work with Jamie on putting together great content for everyone. So I'm going to let her introduce herself in a little bit, but just some quick logistics. Say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from, why you're here. We have some poll questions set up as well, just so we get an understanding for what design tools you guys are using, if you're familiar with design systems, all that fun stuff. If there are questions, yes, this meeting will be recorded. It will be uploaded, and I will cover that in the chat later on. But if you do have questions, please put them in the questions tab, so that way myself or Katie can jump in and ask or answer your questions while Jamie is doing the presentation. But I'm going to hand it over to Jamie while I bring Katie on board.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. Super excited to be here. Hello, everybody. Excited to talk about design systems today. Just like Emily said, please engage with us in the chat. We're excited to talk to you. So while she's adding Katie, I'm going to start to share my screen here so we can get going. There we go. Can everyone see my screen and Katie and everybody?
Can see your face and we can see Katie's face, so not your screen yet.
You can't see my screen?
Hi.
Oh, okay, let me try again.
Hello, everyone. Perfect. We're getting started. So really quickly again, say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from. And if you have questions, please put them in the questions tab. Yes, this will be recorded and I will put information at the end of this. So that way everyone knows where to look for the recording. And then additionally, I believe we're giving away a year of Creative Cloud at the end. Then we will have a question and then we will randomly select the winner. So all the question will be posted at the end.
Yeah, so same as last time, anyone who answers the question correctly is eligible to be randomly selected by your friend here, Caitlin Burke. So I just want to introduce us. So I'm Jamie Newsbach. I'm on the strategic development team. I focus on education. I'm super excited to be here. And I'm going to talk about design systems today. And Katie, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Katie. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I am also on the strategic development team for XD, and I support all of our amazing enterprise customers and clients.
Yay, thank you for helping out in the chat today. So Caitlin will be there in the chat to answer any of the questions that you have as while I'm going. And also, I don't know if I mentioned, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. So if there's any Arizona folks on, please give me a shout out in the chat. I'd love to see my AZ peeps. Okay, so we'll get started. So Emily, if we can just transition to just my screen here, we can get going. I don't know what's happening on the other side. So if you already are, that's great. I do want to thank Designlab. Thanks you guys for hosting us yet again. We love being here with you and your audience. We have a great time with Designlab. So thanks so much for having XD here with you today. All right, so we are set to go. Let's get started. A lot of you are probably asking yourself, what is a design system? You probably, if you're just beginning in your career, you might not have encountered one yet, even if you haven't really worked in a brand or corporation that has one, right? At Adobe, we are seeing that this is a major trend across industries, companies, agencies. People are adopting and building design systems across the board. So as you can see here, I have a definition thrown up. So let's dissect this. A design system is a collection, right? So a collection means we are taking things and grouping them, right? And holding on to them so that we can reuse those elements, right? So we have a collections of things that we want to be able to reuse, but they are guided by clear standards. So it's not we're just taking anything all up in our design system. We got some rules. We got some guidelines in order to get up in this design system. It's not just anything and everything that you're going to reuse. It's purposeful things that abide by standards. Product teams then use this design system to create consistent experiences across a range of products, okay? So often you're seeing teams, you might have 25 UX designers, on a team when you start working in an organization. You know, after you complete your Designlab UX course, you might start working somewhere and everyone's working on different things. So we want that to be consistent. And that is where a design system comes in to help. So as I mentioned, teams encounter lots of challenges when working with multiple designers and multiple different surfaces and different channels. Some of the challenges they encounter are inconsistent design. What does that do, you guys, if we have inconsistent design from our mobile app to our desktop site? It creates confusion for your users. That's bad. We don't want to do that, right? It also creates more work for your development team. And we want to be as friendly with everyone we work with and cross-departmental partners as possible. So giving the development team consistent elements rather than having to design or code everything every single time from scratch is definitely creates more work if you don't have that. Also, it's redundant work for designers. Can you imagine making the same things over and over again? It doesn't seem like a big deal that you just kind of draw out a button, right? And it looks like all the other buttons, but in actuality, maybe your color's a shade off or your padding is different. So every time that button might be a little bit different from the button before. So that's a lot of redundant work and you're doing that every single time. So these are some of the challenges that teams are facing right now. So really what we want is a design system to act as a single source of truth for an entire organization by using a singular design language to guide the development of products. It's not just a collection of design artifacts, it's a philosophy. To create a great user experience, teams should understand not only what they need to build, but also why we need to build it. So once we have a design system in place, we talked about those challenges that organizations are facing. Design systems can help wipe out some of these challenges. We can create products that are optimized for our users, which provides the business value for companies in the long run. Maybe you work at a company right now and you're trying to propose a design system as a solution. Well, here's some reasons why you should do that. You create consistency instead of confusion for your users. It also will improve collaboration across the board with all of your cross-departmental partners, especially the development team that you're working with. It can accelerate your time to market. If you're not wasting time making the same things over and over and over again, you're able to work a lot faster. And ultimately, the bottom line is that this reduces cost. So it's a great way for businesses to, and industry, to accelerate their work and workflows. So what are the elements that actually make up a design system? It consists of both tangible and intangible elements. Things like components, patterns, style guides. These are the tangible things. This is where XD really comes into play, where you're actually making something that you can actually use. The intangible is what we talked about before. Remember the philosophy of having a design system? This is the purpose, the shared values, and these design principles that are built into the system. But most importantly, all design systems start with atomic design. Not all. This is a great way to do it. They should start. This is our, how I see it. What is atomic design, right? This is a methodology that was created by Brad Frost. It helps seek to provide direction on building interface design systems more deliberately and with explicit order and hierarchy. It's pretty obvious here that this was founded in chemistry. We're using terms like atoms and molecules. This is essentially what the building blocks of a design system is based off of. So an atom, what does that mean? This could be something, this is the most simplest piece of the design system. It could be a color, a font style. This is just the basic bare minimum elements that go into it. When you start to combine, let's say color and type together with a shape, you now have a button which could be considered a molecule. We take that button and now we include it with maybe a graphic or a picture and maybe a background. And this has become maybe a little card, and that's now your organism. We take that card with other organisms and we maybe start making templates and pages from there. So you can see how each element builds upon the other to create a full-fledged system. So what are the qualities of a fully well-functioning design system? Now, something to note is that all design systems are a bit different because they are dependent upon the company's needs, but they all share certain characteristics. For example, they need to be easily adopted. It has to be a natural part of the design process. It can't be difficult to use. It needs to be consistent. We've talked about this a lot. This is a major, major way to solve for the chaos of tons of different crazy design elements everywhere. These elements also need to work together. So we need consistent and working together, easily adopted elements. They need to be flexible. Things change. We need to allow for team members to contribute to the design system in new ways. Who knows what's coming next? Documented. This is a really big one. It's one of the most important. You should have detailed information on your design system that's regularly updated. And of course, again, reusable. This is part of that efficiency. Repurpose these elements for a variety of situations. So how do you organize a design system? Like, what does one actually look like? I think I'm ready to show you guys an example. So let's take a real world look at what Adobe's design system spectrum actually looks like. Okay, so you can see I have pulled up a web browser, and you're now taking a look at Spectrum, Adobe's design system. It provides components and tools to help the product teams work more efficiently and to make Adobe's applications more cohesive. So this is a very common way to present a design system. It might not be a design file. It might be a publicly hosted URL or even an internal URL where all teams can come and contribute to this beyond designers. So there's principles here, there's resources and ways to implement. If we start to click through, you can see that these principles, this is the philosophy, come through here, and our principles in action and how we consider all platforms, and we want to make sure our system's for everyone. And we want to make sure that it can evolve. The foundation, so here we get into some of these atomic design principles. We have things like colors that we've defined and for different use cases, so that we can now all be using the same color palette when we're creating things like software that you're using every day. Typography, object styles, it goes on and on. It can get very in depth, even defining illustrations, how we approach inclusive design. There's a content area for even voice and tone. So a design system can include how we speak to our customers, what our tone is like, how we want to come across when we're creating our products, not just from an interface perspective, but also from the copy perspective. We have our components here. So we have like buttons, etc., and all the options with those and how you can use them. You can see this can get very, very immersed. We have cards. When we talked about combining the atoms into molecules, into organisms, here you can see how this is progressing. We have here our colors and our type with our button, and then on a larger card here. And then again, we have tools and resources and support for our design system. We even have Spectrum CSS that you can open and click through, and you can have some actual code included as well in the design system. Again, how we collaborate with development. Okay, so how can XD help us create something like Spectrum for our businesses or for our projects or our company that we work for? And since I'm not going to be able to show you every single feature in XD, I want to kind of just give you a high-level overview of everything that's involved with Adobe XD. And then we'll go into some examples of design systems. So at Adobe, we consider XD the user experience design platform, where teams create the world's best experiences at scale, powered by the leader in creative tools. So we talk XD about design, prototyping, sharing, all in one. So we have a lot of really amazing design tools. So we have optimized vector tools, components with states, responsive resize and repeat grid really change the way designers design. If you haven't tried those features, I highly recommend you do. You can import your Photoshop, Illustrator, and Sketch files straight into XD and start prototyping today. We have features like padding and stacks we just released a month or so ago. It is a game changer, guys. And then being able to toggle to prototype mode right away from your design, not having to upload, not having to have separate software, not having to sync. You're just able to start connecting wires and prototype flows right away in XD. You can even define overlays, fixed elements, and timed transitions. We have a feature called Auto Animate. You guys, I am not an animator. I'm gonna fully confess I have tried. That's really hard for me to understand. But Auto Animate makes it easy. I can actually do micro interactions in XD without having to export, no timelines, or any of that. We can also do voice and audio prototyping in XD. There's no other tool out there that does that. If you're building anything that's for accessibility, where you want people to access your app or your product with voice, XD allows you to do that. Gamepad and keyboard support. You can preview and record. And we also just launched Scrollable Groups, which again, I think are awesome. Check those out. And then of course, we are always thinking about sharing, collaborating. How do we work with everyone on the team? No one's an island. You might be home by yourself right now, but you are working with other folks. It's inevitable. Either it's your client or another designer or someone, a developer. We're always working on teams and together. So you can actually share project deliverables with a link in a web-based review and commenting for stakeholders environment. This has been a game changer for a lot of our customers. You can do web-based design specs for developers. If you're still, manually doing any speccing, now you can do that all in XD. We have cloud-based documents. We even have co-editing beta, you guys. So if you're used to collaborating in other tools, you can do that in XD too. Yes, you can. Remember that. That's like a note for self. Yes, you can work collaboratively in real time in the same document with your friends or your coworkers. We even have document history and design tokens. And last, this is where we're going to spend a lot of time. It's talking about scaling your efforts, right? So when you're first starting designing and you're making one little project, you might not need a design system. You might not even need to worry about sharing that with other designers. But as you grow in your career or as you're starting to get into bigger organizations, things like design systems really matter. Being able to link your assets between documents and designers is important. Having integrations with tools that you're using like Teams, Slack, Jira. Taking part of the Adobe ecosystem, being able to integrate with Photoshop, After Effects, Illustrator, and also Adobe Stock and Adobe Fonts. And also beyond that, even in XD, we are extensible. We have 200 plus plugins available today. What's a plugin, you guys? These are little tool tips that help extend your experience in XD. And I'll show you a couple of those later on. And last but not least, if you haven't downloaded XD or updated it, the time to do it is now. XD offers a free plan. If you don't have to have Creative Cloud to get XD, you can go to the website right now, download the free starter plan, make a free Adobe ID, and take advantage of the capabilities of XD. We also have a promotion going through October where you get unlimited share documents, editors, and links until October. So it's basically like the full thing. So you guys give it a go, download it. I hope you guys learned some things today that'll make you excited to try it. Update if you haven't updated to take advantage of stacks and scroll groups and all the new features that we're always releasing. Okay. All right. So now that we know what a design system is, why companies and organizations are using them. And we've seen a really cool example with Adobe Spectrum. Let's take a look at what it might look like in an XD file. So here I am just scrolling down, and I want to break this down for y'all. It's not as scary as it seems. Yes, design systems are big, they're important, they're significant in how we work, but making them is pretty simplistic when it comes to XD. As you can see, I just have a series of artboards that I've named some of the elements that are important to my design system. This one in particular is about fresh food. So I have an artboard, and we call these sticker sheets in the biz. So if you hear that term, it basically is because this looks like it could be stickers, right? That you peel off and put on, your notebook or whatever. That's also a term you might hear. So when people are saying sticker sheets, they're talking about these little artboards that are the home to the different atoms, if you will, of our design system. We have colors, we have our fonts, and these are things that you're going to be defining over time. If you're not working for a well-established brand, you might not know what colors you want yet. You might not have all your fonts defined. That's okay. Design systems grow with you. You might start with only having a couple colors defined and realize you need more for different user interface elements throughout your design. It's okay, but know that if this is your primary green and you want to reuse this all the time and you want everyone who's working on your fresh food brand to use that green, we want to save that. So first things first, let's take a look at the interface of XD. Up in the corner here, it says design, prototype, and share. And that's where the magic happens. That's really the most important thing to know about XD is you can do all those things in one. We have a big canvas here where all our artboards live, and the properties panel, which is where the magic happens. This will light up with different features based on what I'm doing. We have our toolbar, we have our assets panel, layers, and plugins. We're going to spend time today really in the assets panel. So when I click on this shoebox looking like icon, okay, in the bottom corner here, this drawer is going to pop out. And this is where the beginning of saving these elements starts to happen in XD. So this is where you see we already have some categories defined. We have colors, character styles, and components already here as topics, as different categories. So we talked about this green being really important to our fresh food design system. How do I add that now as a reusable element? How do I start making my collection? Well, you can do it a few ways. You can hit the plus button next to colors in the assets panel. You can right click and you can also add colors to assets. And there's a quick key here as well. I think it's really easy just to hit the plus. So you see now that green has been added to my collection, AKA the assets panel in XD. And it's already named it that hexadecimal number. For a hexadecimal number, you guys, it's just a code of numbers that we use to tell developers which color we're looking for on the spectrum, okay? It automatically does that for us. Now I want to add the rest of these too, and there's a couple ways I can do that. I don't have to do it individually. I can select the group, and I'm going to hit plus again, and it's going to drop in these other colors, okay? And then I want to add these other secondary colors. Well, another easier way is you can actually just select the artboard and hit plus, and it will add the colors in. And notice it didn't duplicate any of the colors I had already added. So now I have these colors in here, but I noticed it added the text here. I don't really want this text gray to be part of my design system. Don't sweat. You can easily remove them. You can hit right click and you get some options here. You can edit. You can delete. You can actually highlight it on the canvas. Right now, we're just going to delete this gray. I don't want this gray, and I don't want this gray. Remember, we are being selective. We have guidelines. We have standards. Our design system needs to be perfect, and I don't want any miscellaneous stuff in there that I use that I don't think is relevant for other people to use. So I'm going to change that and take that out. What's also great about having stuff here is that I can rename this. So you see on the canvas, I have the word primary here to define these colors and secondary to define these colors. Maybe I want that to carry over into my palette here I'm creating in the assets panel. So I can either double click or I can right click and say rename, and I'm going to name this primary if I can spell, highlight, the highlight color. Maybe this is primary UI dark. Pro tip, when naming colors in a design system, don't use the name of the color. Here's the reason. If I put primary highlight green and say 10 years from now or 2 years from now or next week, we decide to change our branding to pink, now that token that says green has an actual pink color. So we're going to just use things like primary UI dark, primary UI medium, and maybe primary UI light. Okay, so we're not using those colors. And then you can also put, secondary, whatever, however you want to define these, first, secondary, maybe we just like, you have to have a naming condition. Let's put 1. We could put 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, and that's the order we'd always want them to occur in. So you have to think through when you're actually making this about this type of stuff so that your system's got longevity. All right, let's move on. Now we're going to add in fonts. So I've defined some fonts here by headline. We have subheadlines, etc. I'm going to go ahead and start doing the same process. I'm going to hit plus, and you see it's automatically added here. I can even do the same thing where I select the whole artboard, but I don't want to do that. I'm just going to select the ones, group select by holding down Shift and add those. Now, something to note about Adobe XD is that we do have an integration with Adobe Fonts. So if I wanted a different font to be able to use that's web ready, I can go to Adobe Fonts. Here, I'm going to click on my Adobe desktop application, and you're going to see something called Manage Fonts. Now, if you have the free version of Adobe XD, don't worry, you actually get a free set of fonts. If you have the full version of Adobe XD, you get all the different fonts. So I can come here and see which fonts I have activated. I can even browse more fonts so I can see which fonts I've turned on. I can browse more fonts. Okay. And then as I go into these different fonts, maybe I'm looking at this one. I can activate it here. And I can also see usage. It's good for websites, how to use. It even comes with CSS here. So we know that this is a web font. We don't want any rasterized text. What does that mean? Text that is part of an image. No, no, no. Bad, bad, bad. We want fonts that are real fonts for accessibility. So people with screen readers can actually read what's on the screen. It also helps legibility. So this is a great tool, you guys, to use these fonts that are already ready to be loaded to your sites with XD. So this is just something I want you guys to pay attention to. You're not limited in XD to a certain number of fonts that come with the platform or having to go externally to get fonts. You can integrate directly with Adobe Fonts for your fonts. And even with character styles, you guys, it's important to name things and be organized. So let's do that. I'm actually going to edit this one, and I'm going to rename it just by hitting rename, sorry. And I'm going to name this headline because that's what it is. It's the headline style text. And again, I'm creating these tokens, if you will, which is a token is just like a name. So it's a fancy term. It took me a minute too to be like, what do you mean design token? I'm like, oh, you mean the name of the thing. Okay. So don't worry. Just we're going to create a name. That's all it is. So it's going to be sub headline large and so forth. And we go sub headline small, main text, and then our active text. We can reorder these in any way we want them to appear, just so that makes sense for when we're coming in and looking for elements from our design system. So now that something's part of this assets panel, it's got special superhero powers. For example, I can change the color of this green, and anywhere that this highlight green, primary highlight green is used, will change on my canvas because it is part of the master panel. So for example, if we get that feedback that the primary highlight is no longer green and it needs to be pink, don't panic. You don't have to go find that green every single instance that you've used it in your project. you can simply come to the assets panel and change it here. Look at what's happening, guys. Look at all these pinks happening here right on the canvas because I'm editing it in the actual assets panel and not individually across the artboards. How cool is that? Talk about a time saver. We're going to keep it green for now. Okay, now we're getting into components. This is where stuff gets crazy cool. Like, I can't wait to show you this. So let's start with a simple component, your logo. This is Fresh Food logo. I want to make this a component. You may have heard the term symbols before. Components is how we approach this in XD. You can do the same thing by hitting the plus here. You can right click and make a component, and we have the quick key here, Command K. So let's go ahead and do that. Wait a minute. Did anybody catch that? Anybody? I don't think so. Let's do it again. What's happening to my logo when I make it a component? Boom, it turns green. Okay. The border changes. Please note, when you make it a component, it's no longer a blue outline. It turns green with a diamond in the corner, folks. This is how we know this is actually a main component, okay? This is a main component that's going to control what happens to all future components, and we'll get to that in a minute. But just something to note, you can also, it'll pick up the name of the layer, or I can name this, maybe this is our main logo, okay? So we're getting organized. We're naming things, we're making things components. We can even make an image a component. You know, I can add this as a, you know, one of my basic building blocks. Maybe this is a specifically branded image to what we do and we need it for other things. We can add that. We can even add icons. Look at all these awesome icons. You go ahead and hit plus here. This one, it was already named, so that's great. You can see them all turning green to say they have been componentized. So here we go. We're adding some. We can add these guys down here. We can add all this great stuff. We can have lots and lots of stuff. It's important to note to name things, because even not just for your own design system, if you're searching for icons, I can type in icons in the assets panel and it will pull up those icons for me. Also, it's important to note that you can connect back to a Creative Cloud library. If you've made a library for another project, maybe in Illustrator or Photoshop, I can open that here in XD. You see, I have one for a project I was working on called Compass. I had already saved my colors and font styles and some components, and I can use that too here in XD as well. So something to note that Creative Cloud libraries do integrate with XD as well. Okay, so we have our basic building blocks. Now things are getting more complex. We're combining these things to make stuff like buttons and cards. We can take this entire card here that's been grouped together, and that can also be a component, right? So our broccoli card now has been turned into a component. So components can be beyond just basic building blocks. They can also be these molecules and organisms that we're creating. So let's take a look at some of the power behind components in Adobe XD. So we might have, you know, a design system, and this is very common. I'm not even going to say might. You guys probably are going to see design systems where there's button states, okay? If you're not designing buttons, I don't know what you're doing, but to be a good product designer, we're going to have buttons, especially when you're in a digital space. I mean, tons and tons of buttons. That's like the thing, right? So how do we work with buttons in Adobe XD and make them really powerful and be able to make them really good and reusable? Well, here's an example of a button that has a hover state. Maybe it's an active state. Maybe there's an outline state when it's on certain backgrounds. And normally we would make each of these their own component. Well, in XD, that's a lot of components to manage and they're not connected. So let's go ahead and make our main button here a component. We're going to group it together. And then I'm going to make it a component. And instead of being called component one, I want it to be called button. So we're starting to name things. And now we're going to talk about instances of a main component. So we know this is our main component because it has the diamond shape, but I want to use this button again someplace else. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this out. And I'm going to go make a change to this. So when I've dragged it out, I now have a hollow diamond. It's a diamond with the white center. That means that this is the child of the parent. But kids don't always want to be like their mom and dad. They want to be themselves. They want to be their own button. So this button's like, I want to maybe be a different color. But the DNA is still the same. It's still an instance of the main component. We have the circle in the middle here that's now telling me this is still an instance, but it has an override. What's an override? A change. A change has happened to this main component. So the change was the color. We can change lots of things. So I might drag out this button again. So we have the instance, and maybe this button wants to say its own thing. It wants to say about. It doesn't want to be button. So now this one also has an override applied to it. But they're still connected back to the parent. At the end of the day, the DNA is the same. I'm still the child of this parent component. So what does that mean for me in my workflow? Now, if I come back to the main component and I want to make a change, like this shape, there might be many reasons we're changing the shape. Sometimes you get the feedback that square buttons are performing better, or the creative director has changed the branding to square, and you think to yourself, oh my goodness, I've got buttons everywhere. They all have to be square now. Panic. Don't panic. Because in XD, you can come back to your design system file, open up this main component, get down to the shape level, and start to change that to a square. And lo and behold, the instances also changed to square in real time. Even though we had overrides, like color, like text, it still will take the change of the shape, because the shape was not overridden, and change that shape like so. Boom. What moment? Let's have like applause. Is there people clapping at home? I'm sorry, I will clap. That's amazing. Wow. Okay. That just saves me a ton of time. I'm going back to rounded buttons, but it gets better than that, you guys. It gets better than that. Now that we understand how overrides work, we understand the philosophy behind a main component, a parent and child relationship between main and instances. Let's now add some states, because we can, and it's fun. Okay, so let's go back to our button component. We're going to go to the properties panel here on the right. You see where my mouse is? There's a plus button. I'm going to hit plus. I'm going to add a hover state. Yeah, I am. I'm going to go do this right now. This was like mind-blowing when I saw this, you guys. I was waiting for this for a long time. I'm like, when am I going to get my hover states? It's here. It's here. It's now. We have them. All I did was come to the properties panel while my main component was selected, the button, and added the hover state option. I'm going to come into my component and I'm going to make a change while I'm selected in that hover state to the background color to be a shade darker. So you see that light blue is telling me what state I'm actually in. And when I toggle back to the default state, you see the color is different. So I can easily show that by saying, here's the default state and here's the hover state. And now that's it. Okay, well, Jamie, how does that work? Let's see, it looks fancy, but I don't see nothing hovering. Well, okay, let's preview this artboard. Here's the moment with truth. I got my little hand icon. Ah, it changed. You guys, it's so great. It's like, I love this. Who doesn't love that? Look, wow. I didn't have to code anything. It just hovers. It makes such a big difference in your projects too. If you're prototyping, if you're user testing, and you're doing a desktop application, get that hover going. It's so easy. You'll look like a pro. Okay, sorry. That was like an exciting moment. That was like, I hope that's not the climax of the entire demo. We still got more to look at. I'm going to add another state. Not a hover state this time, but I want to make the active state. So I'm going to name that active. I'm going to come back to my main component. I'm going to click in there, and the main difference is just this background color again, that easy. So you can see now I have my default, my hover. I've even got an active state up in here. I'm not done yet. I need that other outline state, so make another one. All of these are in the same component. These are not separate. They are together. It's so cool. So I'm going to come back in here, and we need a border now. So we're going to do a border. We're going to make it this color. Maybe it's thicker. We're going to make the fill 0, and then we need this text in the middle to also be the right color. And voila, we have now made the outline version. So you can come through and you can see now all within the same component is all of these states. Why does that make a difference? Well, let's say I'm designing my project. I'm taking my button out. I have an image or something that I need to use the outline state for. I just toggle to that. Boom. Yeah, I just toggled to it. That's it. It's there. I don't have to drag anything out. I have to go looking for it. It's just there. And that's also important because when we make the change to the square corners, whoop, this instance will change too. Right? So we change from here. We're going to change the outline state. We're on outline state. Okay. I'm going to select this shape. Maybe we move something. It will also change. Do you see what I mean? So we're connected back even at the state level. Okay, so we just got our minds blown with how main components handle instances and how overrides work. Well, how do we actually make components that are animated? Well, let's get into some of the ways that prototyping in a design system can actually help you make reusable elements that have functionality tied back to them. So for example, I'm going to do a switch. This is pretty easy. We have the on and off state of these switches. So I'm going to make this again a component, and I'm going to make this named switch, and it turns green. Now I don't want to have to wire multiple artboards together just to be able to toggle between this switch on and off. I want to be able to do that all within the same component. So I'm going to add a new state that's off, which is this gray version of this. So now that I'm in the off state of my toggle, let's get real close here. I'm going to change this by moving the position. I'm going to pick up this color of the off, and I'm going to change this border color as well to match what the off state looks like. So now within my main component, I have the default state and the off state. Now, how do I make this work? It isn't as magical as the hover state where it just automatically knows what I want it to do, because, there's lots of options now beyond just hover for what I want it to do. So what we're going to go to is now the prototype tab. In prototype mode, I'm going to select my switch, and you can see I can add interactions to this switch. So on the default state, I want to be able to add an interaction that when I tap on it, it's going to automatically animate to the off state, right? And we'll just keep this for now. And then in the off position, I want to add an interaction that when I tap on it, it goes back to the default on state. Okay. So that's it. We just added this thing I call it a tail because it doesn't really go anywhere. It looks like a little tail coming off. It's just indicating with this lightning bolt that there's an interaction added to this component. Okay. So now let's go back to design mode. We'll put it back on the default state, and we'll do the magic again. We'll preview our artboard. And voila! Can you guys see that? I have now made a switch that actually works. Okay, so I can actually move this sucker back and forth. You can even make, when you click on this, it turns in. You can do so many things. You can have navigations that move back and forth. And this can all be part of your design system. And you can define the way you want things to even move and have animation within your design system, and even add components with states. So this is huge, huge, huge. All right, so we have created this amazing, let's just say, our fresh food design system, okay? And we know how it works. We're really happy. We're going to use this switch all the time. We're going to use these buttons all the time. We're ready. We've got our reusable elements. We have our standards in order to get in this system. These are things that qualified. Now what happened is our team is growing and we're going to add more folks. So how do we share this outside of ourselves or even in another project that we might be working on? The key to that is cloud. So you see this cloud doc icon here, right? There's a couple things happening. Because I've saved my design system as a cloud file, it's been saving every single time automatically in the background that I'm making changes. And it depends on what version you have, but it could be up to 30 days, 60 days. These will live and I can go back to any time I want to and open this version of this file, which is awesome. I can even bookmark some of these versions. So let's say I want to bookmark this one from last week. I can name that even if I want to. Now this version doesn't go away after 30 or 60 days. This version stays with me until I decide I want to delete it. So it will be there forever. So I can have versions of this design system saved so I can go back at any time or save that progress. Every time we make an iteration to it, it's in the version history. Pretty awesome. Another benefit of having a cloud-based document is the ability to turn on co-editing beta, okay? So in order to share this with Caitlin in the chat, for her to come in and contribute to this design system or consume this design system, I can turn on co-editing beta. You guys, please know, every time you do, you have to turn it on because it's still in beta. You have to opt in on every document. So you must click this little button down there. Otherwise, you're going to get a weird experience. Something else to note, if you're going to be doing this with your friends, you're going to want to make sure you're all on the same version of XD, okay? So that's also important. So if they're having any struggles with this, one, make sure you've enabled it, and two, make sure that everyone on the team is on the same version. I'm going to cancel this for now because I need to move on with my demo. So two great benefits. The third is I now have to make, let's say, the desktop version of Fresh Food. I have it as a mobile app, but I've got a new project, or maybe Katie's working on the desktop version of the Fresh Food. So we open a new XD file. We're ready. We've got our template open. It's like, oh, no. Remember those challenges I talked about at the beginning where folks are going and like, well, I don't have anything. So I'm just going to, okay, I need a button. So I'm just going to kind of sort of, maybe it looked like this. I don't know. What color green was it? Let's just pick a green I think is close. Maybe it was that green. I don't know. And so our button is now turned into a hot mess. So, you know, my buttons aren't going to match back to the buttons that Katie's using. Mine's going to look a little different. And imagine the frustration of a developer when they get a file like this and they're like, this doesn't look like the other thing. I have to make a whole new thing. Was that intentional? I'm confused. So this is a no-no. This is the chaos we're trying to solve for. So now how do I get all of those things we just created for this other project or the system that's a separate file into my current file? Well, you may have noticed this big blue button. Well, I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I can search by cloud documents shared with me. I can even convert a sketch library if I want. But I'm going to open this file that I was using just a minute ago. And voila! All my colors, styles, everything that I had in that other system is now here in my new file. It's got a green link, which means it's linked back to a design system. So we're using the correct approved stuff. But we can't stop that creative director from changing her mind on making this button to have square corners. We can't stop it. It's going to happen. So we're going to change it. And you notice on your same document, the instance reflected that change. But also, we're going to come back. Let me make sure this saves to our linked. What happened? There's a blue icon now. People, this corner has a lot of action happening in it. All these different shapes and icons mean things. So what happened? Oh, I rolled over it here in the assets panel and it previewed that, hey, it's a square now. Note to self, you're using the wrong button. And I can update that Boom. And now I'm using the correct button. I don't have to worry about going and finding this button all over the place. It will just automatically connect back. It's so great. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. That's my main demo for how you can start building these elements that are going to go into your design system. But I also want to show you how you can share this with a developer. So I've gone ahead and I'll show you quickly what I did. I'm just going to jump to the link. In share mode, you can come here and see that you get options here to share. You can share for design review, development, etc. I chose development. You can choose web, iOS, or Android, and you can even include assets to be downloaded. And this is something that is a little bit of a manual process. So not everything's going to be included by default. You will have to turn that on. I can also choose if I want to make it invited people or anyone with the link, and I can make a link. So I've already made the link, and this is what has happened. I get this type of interface now in a web-based browser view, which is great because my developer doesn't even need to have XD. They can just use this link, and that's it. So the developer can actually make comments on here. We can have a dialogue with them. They can go to the upper left corner here and see it in a card view, and you can see the names of the artboards here of everything that's included in my design system. When I click into these cards, I have options under sign in here with the these three icons. Well, when I click on this, now XD has extracted these hexadecimal colors, and notice that primary highlight token we added is there in the name too. So they can come here and one-click copy. They can also click on this third icon and get these tokens and the values. So we had primary highlight with the hexadecimal number right here in these different codes that they can select. As you move through the different artboards, you can see that the experience changes. Now that we have icons, I can actually download as a developer these icons straight from this interface. How sweet is that? You don't have to hand off a separate file. With SVGs, they can just one click and download those right here to start building and coding with these. And when you have more complex things to your design system like cards, they can inspect the artboard and get the spatial relationships of how many pixels things are. So you don't even need to worry about speccing that out. They can come here and they can get some of these properties even in code and be able to click around and consume that. So that's pretty awesome. All right, so I promised you I'd show you a few useful plugins that will help you as you're building your design system. So let's go ahead and do that. Go back to design mode, and I'm going to toggle to the plugin panel, which is like this Lego thing in the very, very bottom corner. And my panel is going to change to some different plugins that I have already installed. If you haven't installed yet, don't worry. Just go to plugins, discover, and you can discover plugins here that you are interested in for working in your XD experience. You can see we have popular sketch plugins. This is a great one. Folks transitioning over really like that we have the same plugins. Flutter is a great one, really popular if that's the code base that you're using. UI faces. We even have categories down here depending on what it is you're looking for. The first one I want to call out though is icons for design. These are open source, license-free, no attribution required icons from resources like Awesome, Feather, Iconic, Map, Material, if you've heard of any of these. So it's pulling from those databases for you. So even if you need like a social media icon for your design, just type in Facebook and you can now add this straight to your artboard as a vector object. I think I've used icons for design on almost every single project I've ever made. So highly recommend you use this one, especially if you're building out some of these reusable components. You might want to pick some of these and modify them or tweak them and use this in your system. Another one is Mimic. So if you're a student, okay, you might get a project where you're like, oh, go to such and such website and then, assess it, make a recommendation for how they can improve it. And you're like, oh, how do I get started with all the colors and everything? So let's put in a website here. Try Designlab.com and see what happens. So we're doing an assessment. We're going to make try Designlab.com better, do our UX on it. And what's happening is Mimic's going to extract the colors, character styles, font names, and any images onto artboards. Sorry, Designlab, but I did just pull your fonts. Here are the colors, right? So what does this look like? Looks familiar to you, like the basic sticker sheet for your design system, and any images that were being used that I can start to use to do my UX and make my prototype or wireframe, so that I can do some user testing. So I love Mimic. I think this is really fun. Download this one and put in your favorite website, see what happens. We also want to think about things like accessibility, right? So that's a major trend right now. It shouldn't be a trend. It should just be what we do anyway. We should always be thinking about all users, regardless of their age or disability. So Stark is a great one for checking things like color contrast. It does a lot more, but I highly recommend you download Stark, and we'll just do a simple color contrast check. Basically, it's saying, is this text readable on this background? Ooh, that's not great. It only passes when it's large text. So there's a ranking system, the A, AAA, etc., and we're not really making it. So let's make an adjustment here to this color and try again. Yes, now we've got all green. We are good to go. You might want to check your colors and make sure that they pass before you. That's one of the standards we're putting into place before it's allowed into our design system. So that's a great one. And then, of course, if you're interested in getting into deeper into Spectrum, we actually have a plugin for Spectrum here in XD as well, so you can utilize some of these font styles, etc., right into your file. And then zero height. If you don't have an online system like Spectrum has and you want one, you can go ahead to go to zeroheight.com. We have an integration with them and a plugin for them where you can directly upload your components. See, we have XD here right into Zero Height. So this is another great one. All right, so UI kits. I got to talk about UI kits real quick. This is another great way to get, you can go to File, UI kits. You can see we have Apple, Material, Microsoft, wireframes, and more UI kits. You can add these to your XD file. You can have more than one in your file at a time to be able to use when you want to. We also have a ton more on Adobe's website. So let me get to that. So you can see here as you scroll down, there's lots of options for you to pick up different UI kits and start playing around there. Also, if you're interested in learning more about Zero Height, go ahead and go to LinkedIn. This link here, Zach Perkins is on Katie and my team. He's awesome. He did this great session with Zero Height, and he talks about design systems there as well. We have a YouTube series that goes through all these different features I talked about and way more. So come here, subscribe, and watch the YouTube series. If you want to see examples of design systems that are out there in the wild that are published, look at, you can see REI's design system. Get inspired here. See what folks are doing. Check these out. Go to designsystemrepo.com. And also, you can use this fun checklist as a great resource for you to get started. So you can come here and ask yourself, do we have a vision statement? Are we including considering design principles? And check through these as you're going to make sure you have a monochrome version of your logo and that you're covering all your bases as you're building out your design system. So we have about 2 minutes left. I hope Katie did a good job answering all the questions for you here. I'm going to come back on. How do I stop sharing? No. There we go. I found it. Ha! Hi, Emily. Hi, Katie.
You have so much energy. Like, I am living for your energy today.
I get so excited. Like, I nerd out on stuff like this. It's so cool. So amazing. So, Emily, I think we have one last thing to do with the help of Caitlin here. We have to give away the free year of Creative Cloud.
Oh. Who doesn't love free stuff, right, everyone?
Right.
We love free stuff.
So get ready in the chat, everybody. The way this is going to work, I'm going to ask a question. You're going to put your answer in the chat. We're going to give it like a countdown from 10. And then a random person is going to be selected, and Katie's just going to shout out your name, okay? So I want you to send me an email. Okay, when you win, if you're the winner, I want you to. Okay, so we're going to get connected. I'm going to find you. You're going to find me. It's going to be great. My email is just my last name at adobe.com. Okay. All right. Here's the question. Are we ready? Ta-da. What is the name of Adobe's design system? Okay, everybody. 10, 9, 8. This is going to blow up the screen. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay.
Never seen so many chat messages just populate all in like 2 seconds.
Blasting us, right? I'm getting 150 all at once. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Christina K.
Christina.
Yay!
K. Christina K. Whoever you are, what's your last name? Please put your full name in the chat so I can find you. Congratulations, Christina. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you guys had a good time. Okay, so it's Christina Kong. Thank you. Hope you guys had a good time today. We love hanging out with Designlab. So.
We love hanging out with you. Oh my goodness, like both you and Katie, like, Katie, you rock in the questions, by the way. Like I can only imagine how fast your fingers are flying on that keyboard.
It's a skill. It's a skill.
That's a skill. Thank you, everyone. Thanks everyone
Yeah.
for being here. So really quick, I'm going to post the YouTube link in the chat in case you want to review the recording or if you want to share it out. And then follow us on Instagram. We do post our events on there as well when we do host more events with Adobe. So definitely give us a follow. So here is the link posted in the chat, and then we have our Instagram handle in there too. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Jamie and Katie. You guys rocked it like usual. And then hopefully, like seriously, you guys rock it like usual. Great. So Christina, the directions are to email Jamie, yeah?
Yeah, send me an email.
Yep, Christina, send Jamie an email so that way you can get your year of Creative Cloud. Yay! Thank you.
Bye,
all right, everyone, we will see you later. Happy Friday. Have a good weekend.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.